everybody. I want to thank you first of all for inviting me. Otherwise I wouldn't be here, because nobody gets to Southern Maryland without any real purpose to come. And my purpose to you is to talk to you. I will tell you a story which is horrible on the surface, but very true. It is the story of my life. And I want to give you a few statistics which you can listen to and then forget about it. I was born on 1 March 1922, and to save you the math, I'm 92 years old. And as you notice, I'm holding myself from preventing to collapse here, but an old man has to have something to hold on to. I'm from a middle-class family, mother, a housewife, father, an MD, and siblings, none. Me. My mother, I was told when I was born, took one look at me and said, "Oh boy, enough is enough. I'm not going to have more of those." And I stuck as the only child. I was born and raised in Berlin, Germany. Anybody been to Berlin? One? Anybody been to Germany? Much better. So, we want to talk about Berlin, we want to talk about Germany, and we want to talk about me. I was born Jewish, obviously father, mother Jewish, but I want to stress and say that at the very beginning, ladies and gentlemen, that my family were first of all German. Secondly, they were German. Thirdly, they were German. And only then were they Jewish. So being Jewish played a very minor role. My father, and I have actually a biological father, and I have a stepfather because my mother remarried. They were both soldiers in the Emperor's army during World War I. They fought for Germany during that war. Both got decorated and both got the Iron Cross first class. So the reason I'm mentioning it, because later on you will listen, it saved my life. It's the decoration which they got in the fact that they fought in the First World War for Germany saved my life later on. So here we were, a middle-class family, nothing special. We lived in an apartment on the 3rd floor in one of the large houses in Berlin. No elevator, but in those days it didn't matter too much. We were both young and healthy and lived. There's nothing very special to report to you except that I need you to realize the following. The Nazis came to power in 1933 and vanished in 1945. That's 12 years. And what I'm going to do, and you have been most generous time-wise, because normally I get 45 minutes plus questions, and I'm asking you, how do you cram 12 years of your life in meaningful 45 minutes? Almost impossible. You guys have been extremely generous. I got much more time. So, by the time you go home tonight at 5 o'clock, when I finish talking, don't not to worry, it won't take that long. I will have told you the story. Let me tell you about the Holocaust. Let me tell you how the Holocaust got to me. Even though nobody used the word Holocaust in those days, nobody knew what was going to come. But my first introduction that something was going on was like this. The means of mass communications in the 1920s was not television, as you well know. It was newspapers and radio. And my first memory of the radio was that my father, who was very politically minded, had the dancing going on like my kids have the TV going on. It was going round the clock. He was listening to all those speeches and the music, and something was pretty. But I remember as a kid, when I was about 6, 7 years old, that I heard a voice which kept screaming into the microphone wherever that microphone was standing. But the loudspeaker, of course, was in Berlin, in my father's living room or practice room, and excuse me, and I heard things which absolutely made no sense. Talked about Jewish conspiracy, talked about Jews having caused the loss of World War I. Jews signed the Versailles Treaty, and of course I heard the words, didn't understand the meaning, much too young, so I went to my mother. And I remember vaguely that I said, "Mother, who is this guy?" And my mother said, "That's some German politician, don't pay any attention to him." But I said, "He says things which somehow strike home. He talks about Jews being bad people. Jews are our undoing. Jews have caused this. Jews have done this." And I knew I was Jewish, even though it wasn't a type of Jewishness which is dedicated and religious and so forth. It was a fact that I was, on my birth certificate, was a line item about religion, which was filled out that I was Jewish. And by the way, if later on you have in your mind, how did the Nazis know who was Jewish? It's that very birth certificate, where it says Lutheran, Catholic, Jewish, what have you. So I got to my mother and I said, "Mom, who is this guy who keeps yelling and Dad keeps listening to?" "Oh," she said, "don't you worry about it. That's some politician. If your father," and that's a quote, "is dumb enough," unquote, "to want to listen to the guy, don't you pay any attention." And she tried in her own way to explain to me what a democracy is. Remember, I was 7, 8 years old, and it was only difficult for me to understand it. But what the words I remember most of all is that you don't have anything to worry about. We live in a good country. The Germans like us. We are treated equally like everybody, and not for you to worry about it. So what does a kid do when mother says it? Does exactly that. You don't worry about it. And I didn't worry about it. I played, I went to school, I lived a child's life without being hampered or hindered by some political movement of which I understood nothing, and my mother said I don't have to worry about it. And then, ladies and gentlemen, and then, these famous last words, "don't you worry about it," changed on one day. Not a week, not 2 weeks, not 3 days, and one solitary day. I want you to remember that day when you talk about the Holocaust, which is the 30th of January, 1933. So what happened on that day? Very simple. Remember when I told you the voice out of the radio talking about the bad Jews? That man who did that speaking became the Chancellor of Germany. And the Chancellor of Germany, in essence, if you want to know what power does a Chancellor have, if you want to put it on the lowest denominator, a Chancellor under the parliamentary system has as much power as the President of the United States. He became it. Hitler suddenly, on that day, appointed by our senile President Paul von Hindenburg, became the leader of Germany. It was such a dramatic change, because from that moment on, what used to be a republic with a constitution, what is known as the Weimar Constitution, Weimar being no more than a town in Germany where the constitution was written, and went into history as the Weimar Constitution, which gave essentially the same rights as you and I have as Americans, the Germans got. That Constitution went away with one stroke of a pen by the president who appointed Hitler, the man who declared that the Jews are the worst thing that runs the earth and need to be eliminated from official life. He was it. Let me share with you a little known fact. Germans love to sing, whether it's folk things, whatever it is. I want to share with you what happened on the 30th, in the evening of the 30th of September 33. The Nazis staged a huge torch march. They had the torches in their hand, and they all marched towards the Wilhelmstrasse, where Hitler had his office, excuse me, had his office, and they were singing. And that song, in translation, the opening lines were, "When Jewish blood spurts from our knives, then our lives will be so much better." Now take a second and chew that sentence around. When our blood spurts from our knives, which clearly indicates, even to a kid, that they intend to hurt us, otherwise the blood wouldn't spurt. How do you feel? You're 7, 8 years old, and you hear that coming out of the radio. Well, you can say, well, why don't you turn the radio off? Well, my father finally did. But the words already sank in. And here we were, a totally change of lifestyle happened now. So how did that manifest itself? What really changed? The Nazis, now in power, with all the rights and privileges they awarded themselves, made it a dedicated campaign to eradicate the Jews out of Jewish life. Did they kill him in 1933? No, they did not kill him. But they made, but they began to make life so miserable that affected all of us. There was a flood of new regulation coming down the pike by the Nazis, which impacted our life in every aspect. School. I was kicked out of school because they didn't want Jewish kids in Christian schools. So, did I have a substitute? No, because even though the Jewish community in Berlin did open Jewish schools for Jewish kids, they were totally oversubscribed, and by the time my parents got around to enrolling, it was full. And ladies and gentlemen, I have been totally uneducated until I came in America. I came to America in 1947, and you can maybe do the math. I was homeschooled as best as my mother and father could, but a formal education, the very privilege you enjoy by being here, was denied to us. No schooling. We were not allowed to live a life which the kids enjoy. Sports. Most sports, in fact, all the sports I remember were prohibited. My favorite sport was swimming. So what do you need to swim? You need water. A problem? Not a problem. Plenty of water. But you also need a pool. And the pools suddenly had big signs. There's no Jews allowed in this pool. I've been going to this for years in my young life. Suddenly, I wasn't allowed to go into the water in that particular pool. Other sports were prohibited. Just imagine yourself, if your favorite sport is soccer, what do you need to play soccer? Not very much. You need a ball, you need a goal, and you need some even terrain there. And suddenly that very terrain where you used to play had a sign, no Jews. Whole villages in Germany, in the countryside, had signs at the entrance to the village. We do not want Jews in our thing. We haven't done anything. Let me give you a practical example. Help me. I want everybody to stand up who's got brown eyes and remain standing. Now, get up. Anybody with brown eyes, stand up and look at me and don't sit down until I tell you. Now, I'm going to declare that you folks with the brown eyes are bad, miserable people. Do not deserve to be happy and lead a normal life. So how do you feel? How do you feel if I tell you that? You feel lousy, wouldn't you? If you believe me, because I have the power. I'm Hitler. I'm telling you you're bad. So here the first question comes into your mind and says, why? What did I do? I was born with brown eyes. Do you have a choice to change them? No, you can't change your eyes. Contact lenses did not exist in the 1920s, so forget that. You're stuck with your brown eyes, and everybody knows that you are a bad person. Why? Because I say so. And I have the power to say so. And you are now stigmatized, knowing that the majority of the German people condemns you for having brown eyes. Sit down, please. I just want to tell you, that's dictatorship. Substitute brown eyes for Jewish religion, and you have the same effect you just had there. You stood up because you had brown eyes, and nobody tells you why other than to say, because I say so. Did you have a choice? No, you didn't have a choice. Did I have a choice? No, I didn't have a choice. I wasn't even particularly Jewish, other than on my birth certificate. You remember when I told you in the beginning, my people were German and more German. They wanted to be more German than the Germans. And that is beginning to haunt us, because they wouldn't let us be German. Let me give you a few nice facts. Every September, from 1933 to 1944, the Nazis had a big rally in the city of Nuremberg, and in September. Every year they come together, 100,000 of them, with marches and singing and folk songs and what have you. And the one in 1934, only 1 year after Hitler became to power, they did something which hurt my father so bad, and my mother as well, not me, I was too young. They took away our citizenship by edict. Now let me bring that home to you. How many of you have an American passport? Okay, suppose I declare that that passport is invalid. You're no longer a German, an American citizen. You got the right to stay here. We had the right to remain in Germany. We became residents without any civil rights. Could we vote? No. Could we do all the other things which a citizen is allowed to do? No. And here is a man, my father, who put on a uniform for Germany to fight for Germany and risk his life. I have uncles, a brother of my mother, who got killed 3 months after the war broke out in August of 1914. He was in America, just to tell you. He was what in those days called the black sheep. That means a no-goodnik, whom the family exported to America. He was home, he lived in New York. And he was, as I said, a brother of my mother, an uncle of mine. And what did that guy do? When the war broke out in August 1914, He smuggled himself on a Spanish ship, went back to Germany, arrived in Germany the end of August 1914. In October, he was dead, killed in battle for the emperor, for Germany, and those were the very same people who now tell me that I'm not worthy to be a German. So, does it hurt you physically? No, it doesn't hurt you physically. Does it hurt you mentally? Yes, it does. I mean, if I were to tell you that all your passports are no longer any good, does it hurt you? Does it mean you're hungry? No, but it's a psychological impact. And so Germany began to change a degree which is almost difficult to describe. For people like you are young and healthy and good looking, and suddenly everything in the world is ugly. Let me give you a couple more examples so to bring home what I'm talking about, because I know it's difficult for you to even envision the things that happen. Where we lived, there was a little park downstairs. Few trees, few benches, little grass, people could stop, relax, sit down, so forth. One day, a guy came with a paintbrush and a bucket of paint and painted one of those benches yellow and stenciled in the rear the words, "For Jews only," so that any Jewish person who wanted to sit down there, immediately labeled himself or herself as a Jew, one of the despised people. There's a very famous photograph in the Holocaust Museum, if you go to Washington, where a woman sits on a bench and puts her hand in front of her face because she doesn't want to be recognized, and she sits on one of those yellow benches. Those are minor things, you think, but you don't know how much psychologically they hurt, because you again become an outcast. It was a thing. Slowly but surely, sports clubs were prohibited. School was prohibited. My father, who was a doctor, got most of his patients through the insurance companies who paid. We didn't have the same problem as we have here, because everybody was insured at the time he was born. And he was no longer allowed to accept money from the insurance company. As a matter of fact, my father was told that he can only treat Jewish patients. That was it, which immediately took his practice and cut it way down, because most of his patients were Christians, Germans. See, when I use the word Germans, I cringe, because we consider ourselves Germans, but you have to substitute. They were Jews, and in the eyes of the Germans, they were not longer Germans. They were just Jews who were a race aside from everybody else, who have all the bad intentions to hurt the German people. And of course, that's not true. So you live a life without any future, not knowing what's going on, and slowly but surely you come to a point where life doesn't seem really exciting. But my gosh, we were 15 years old. That's the time when you want to live, when you want to go out, when you want to have a girlfriend, when you want to flirt, when I'm not going to finish that sentence. That's the life you wanted to live. Take a girl out for a cup of coffee or a Coke or something, and we didn't have Coke, we had lemonade. And so it was that type of life we wanted to live. Did we work around it? Oh yeah. Now I'm going to confess something to you, and if you repeat it, I'm going to deny it. What we did have, we had house parties. House parties were well organized. For example, if I'm the host of a house party, I took my parents and sent them to somebody else's parents. So the apartment was all ours. We invited girls, there were boys, we danced, we sang, and what else we did, I'm not going to elaborate on, but it was fun. That was the only time we had the fun, within the four walls of our homes. So there were ways around, except that the future was beginning to look worse and worse. So when you live under those circumstances, what keeps you going? What makes you, what motivates you to keep you going? I'll give it to you in one word. H-O-P-E. As long as you could hope that the current situation is not the end of the line, that things will change, as then you got something solid to hang on to. As long as you're convinced this is not going to be the rest of my life. But as the years tick by, as the days tick by, as the weeks tick by, that hope diminished. It became less and less formal. We became more and more children who didn't enjoy life as much anymore as we wanted to, because the future looked even worse. Let me give you some example of our daily life. The German newspapers had an obligation to print one anti-Jewish article a week. Even if they had to invent it, they had to publish it. People read it, people around it. Let me clue you in on the German customs. In the old days, when the husband was a medical doctor, whom you call doctor, then the wife automatically became Frau Doctor. Even my mother was always Frau Doctor, even though she had never been anywhere near a university. But she was always called Frau Doctor. Suddenly, she wasn't called it anymore. People ignored it, changed it. Did you know that my father, a medical doctor, was not allowed to call himself doctor? In other words, when you go to a medical person, to call him automatically, doctor, I need an appointment, doctor, I need a prescription. He was not allowed to use the word doctor anymore. I will give you another example. It is 10 o'clock at night on a day I don't remember. But I remember the incident. The doorbell rang. It so happened that I was in the hallway, and I opened the outside door, and there was a lady standing, approximately, I would say, 60 years old, very nicely dressed, and she said to me, "Go get your dad." I said, "Ma'am, won't you come in, please? He is in the..." She said, no, I don't want to come in. Ask him, please, to come to the entrance door. I want to talk to him." Okay, so what do you do as a kid? You go in and say, "Dad, there's a lady out there, she wants to talk to you." And my father said, "Yeah, I know, I heard her voice, tell her to go away." So I looked at him. I said, what did you just say? I tell her to go away. I don't want to see her. I was shocked. I was so disappointed. Here is a man who swore an oath to help and to heal people, suddenly says that he doesn't want to see a patient of his. Well, to make a long story short, he explained to me later on, after I got very upset with him, that the law prohibits it from treating German Christian patients. He was only allowed to do this. And if he had gone out and talked to this woman and tell her something medically important, he would have been punished, because he didn't know if that woman didn't work for the Gestapo and would say, "Yeah, I went to this Jewish doctor and he helped me." Bingo. It would have been a punishment worthy of what? You don't know what they impose on you. So that's the type of life that was going on. The future was strange. Everything I told you just now about miserable life suddenly vanished. No more anti-Jewish signs, no more you can't, Jews not wanted here, all gone. Everything was nice and peaceful like it was before Hitler came to power. Anybody guess why? The Olympics. Exactly right, sir. Thank you. The Olympics were held long ago before in Berlin, and the Olympics were 14 days long, and the Nazis, being the excellent organizer they are, they cleaned the city out. All the signs were gone, all the bookstores were empty of anti-Semitic books, nothing. I remember that we had friends coming from Holland who stayed with us to visit the Olympics, and said to my mother, I don't know what you guys are complaining. Everything is clean, everything is orderly, the trains are on time, so what's the big problem? That's how they fooled people. And as soon as the 2 weeks were over and the Olympics were finished, everything was back to normal. And so we had a life without any future, without any hope, and if you don't think that gets to be depressing when you see a people with whom you lived peacefully next to each other suddenly turns into vicious, mean, ugly people, even though they were your neighbors for years and you never had any quarrel with them. Let me give you one more example of propaganda. Everybody know what propaganda is. I don't need to explain this. Propaganda is a tremendously powerful weapon. And I will give you an example. Right now, the Jews have Passover. What do Jews eat at Passover as far as bread is concerned? They eat a special bread which they call matzahs, and which you can get anywhere in the grocery stores, and which is authorized for the Jews to eat at Passover. The governor of Bavaria, we call him Gauleiter, but it's the same thing as the governor, a guy with the name of Julius Streicher, who, in addition to being the governor of Bavaria, also owned a newspaper. The newspaper was called Der Stürmer, and that newspaper, ladies and gentlemen, who published once a week, was dedicated, the whole newspaper, about anti-Semitism. It did nothing but anti-Semitism, national and international. And that was the whole mission of that newspaper. It didn't report on political events or accidents or what have you. It was dedicated to anti-Jewish news stories. And one day they published an article which said this, that in order for the Jews to bake their special bread at the time of Passover, they must kill a Christian child. It was essential that a Christian child, the blood of a Christian child, is being used to build this. Now, you know, and I know what the story like this is. It's plain adulterated BS, if I may say that, and not a word true, nothing. But yet, when I was 6 months old, my mother hired a nanny. For many reasons, which I don't want to go into it, I am for a very dysfunctional family. So that my nanny, her first name was Betty, actually is the one who really raised me. She knew me from I was a tiny baby to the time when that article was published. And she asked me if I had read that article, the one which allegedly a German child need to be killed to use the blood to bake the matzah. So I said, no, I haven't read it, but I heard about it. And she said, do you think this is true? I said, Betty, how can you say this? You knew me for 15 years. Do I look like somebody who goes out and kisses? No, no, she said, of course not. You are different, but the other Jews, do they do this? Talk about the power of propaganda. Here's a woman who absolutely 100% knew that Jews don't do that. And yet, she dared to ask the question. So you live in a society where you know you can't win. There were Jewish families who believed in the idea that you must obey any of the anti-Jewish measurements and laws the Nazis created. And the more you obey, the better will be off. Not true. Not true. Everything was arbitrary, and they punished you whenever they felt like it for reasons they invented. There was no way that you could win that. And so I lived a life which was pretty hopeless. And all of a sudden that changed. I had a break, and talk about a break. Briefly, the story goes like this. A Jewish philanthropist who lived in Sweden, opened up a boarding school for German Jewish kids who were persecuted in their own country. And he said, you come here, you want to be in a free country, no more Nazi, no more anti-Semitism, no more killing Christian children, nothing. You're home, free. My mother succeeded to enroll me, and suddenly in late 1937 I was out of Germany, I was in a free country, and normally my story would end here, but it doesn't. Because 6 months after the school opened, it closed again. Why? When my mother came to the bank and saying, I need to exchange German currency for Swedish currency to pay the tuition, the clerk told my mother, we don't do this anymore. We got other priorities, and tuition for your son is not a priority. We need that money for other purposes. And to make a long story short, 6 months later the school was closed. My mother was selfish because the director of the school told us that they have found Swedish family. We were about 30 kids there. The director of the school system had found Swedish families who said, we take your son or your daughter and they can stay with us, they don't have to go back to Germany. Well, again, I told you I was from a pretty dysfunctional family. My mother insisted that I go back home, and 6 months later, after the school opened, that must have been late 1937, maybe early 1938, you get sort of rusty when you get my age, and suddenly I was back in Germany, and the whole mess was on me again, except it was a little worse. In the meantime, while I was in Sweden in the 6 months, the Germans instituted a forced labor program. Now, forced labor is not slave labor. The major difference on the slave labor, you were in a concentration camp. On the forced labor, you lived at home, but you had no choice. You must report to a certain office, which they established, and there you would get work assigned every day, not much pay, but mostly physical labor, like bringing bricks on construction site, like carrying coal into basements where people have central heating, and that type of thing. And it was hard labor, but it was bearable. And we thought, well, if that's the worst that happens, we can hopefully survive this. and wait for better times to come. Now, when I told you that story, what I told you so far, you must in your mind probably thought, if it was so bad, why didn't they get out? If you take one look at a European map, you see free countries everywhere. Start up north, Norway, go to Sweden, go to Denmark, move over to Holland, to Belgium, Luxembourg. They're all free countries, democratic countries. Why didn't you get out? Well, now I got to make a confession. Getting out wasn't even that difficult. The Germans said, you want to go? Go. The only thing, you couldn't take anything with you. Whatever money, whatever property you owned, stayed there. So you would go out with a little suitcase and 10 marks in your pocket, and that would be it. Not easy to start a new life. Furthermore, and that's between you and I, the Berlin Jews really had two goals, two countries where they wanted to go. The one was Palestine in those days. Palestine, of course, was run and operated by the British. The Arabs had no desire to have a bunch of German Jews come in there. They wanted to run their own show, which on the British, needing Arab oil, decided we cannot antagonize the Arabs, and they curtailed German immigration to Palestine very, very heavily. It wasn't easy for a German Jew to go to Palestine. The other, I would say, 2/3 of the Berlin Jews want to all go to America. And America made it extremely difficult to come here. There's lots of reasons. I can spend an hour with you why America was, but I will not do that. I will only tell you how the immigration policy of the American government manifested itself. The American immigration system is based on a quota system. That means if a country had 60 million people, and let's say Germany, which was the case at 60 million people, then maybe 25,000 Germans could come to America. The German quota was constantly exhausted because everybody wanted to go there. Furthermore, President Roosevelt appointed a person with the name of Breckinridge Long, Mr. Long. Mr. Long from Virginia here became the chief of the visa section. The chief of the visa section is the very person who approved the entrance of a family into the United States. Well, Mr. Long wasn't a great friend of the Jewish people who want to come in there. And so it was extremely difficult. What Mr. Long instituted, and I would like for you to remember that word, is an affidavit. So what in the world is an affidavit? Affidavit is nothing more than a sponsorship. Any German who wanted to come to America needed to have a sponsor. And that sponsor was responsible from soup to nuts, from housing to medical to work, to you name it, and you could never go to an American government facility and saying, help me. You had to go to your sponsor. Sponsors were hard to find. America was still in the last throes of the Great Depression. There was a lot of unemployment. It wasn't easy to take a family of 3-4 people from Germany and make sure that they have a decent living, that they have decent work, that they have decent clothing, and so on and so on. So it was extremely difficult to get that affidavit approved by the American State Department after you found a person, a family who could sponsor you. I remember going down to the American Embassy, and after I came back from Sweden, I went to the American Embassy, and the old one was destroyed. It was right next to the Brandenburg Gate, and a line around the block. We were waiting to get in. I finally got in, and the first thing, a young lady who spoke very good German, because I didn't speak any English, asked me, may I help you? And I said, yeah, my mother, who was in the meantime divorced, my mother and I would like to go to America. And promptly she said, do you have an affidavit? I said, no, we don't. She said, well, I'm awfully sorry. You've got to find a sponsor in America who will take responsibility for your family, and then we may be able to issue you a permit, a visa to come to America. Well, out of the question, didn't fit us, so forth. So, I now come back from Sweden. I'm with forced labor, and if you think that's the end of the story, it can't get any worse, let me try this on you. In Paris lived a Polish student, about 19 years old, with the name of Herschel Greenspan. He studied at the Sorbonne, and he gets a letter from his sister who lived in Germany, who was Polish. Herschel was Polish. They were all born in Poland. They had Polish passports, and suddenly the Polish government declared those passports null and void. So the Germans said, that's great. Now all these guys are stateless. They have no government to protect them. We're going to kick them out. And kick them out they did. Now, anybody here who's been to Germany in the months of November, December, will agree with me that the weather is pretty lousy. It's cold, it's raining, it's miserable. So those poor people who got kicked out, set in no man's land, between the Poles who wouldn't let them in, between the Germans who wouldn't let them in, back, and the sister of Herschel writes him a letter how miserable they are. So what does Herschel do? Herschel says, I'm not going to take this lying down. I'm going to get even. Nobody treats my parents the way the Germans treat them now. I said, I'm going to get even. To make a long story very short, he said he's going to kill the German ambassador to France. He buys a second-hand pistol, he goes to the embassy, he asks her what he wants. He said he wants to see the ambassador, it's very important, and whoever answered him said the ambassador is not available, but the first secretary is the guy with the name of Ernst vom Rath, and Ernst vom Rath meets Herschel Greenspan. Herschel Greenspan takes his pistol and kills Ernst vom Rath. And the Germans used that assassination as an opening door to one of the worst atrocities that happened in this time frame. That was what is known as Kristallnacht. It started in, those of you who do not know what Kristallnacht is, it was a night from the 8th to the 9th of November 1938, when the Germans began to burn the synagogues, to loot the stores after they smashed the window. That's where the word Kristallnacht comes from, because all the glass from the shop windows was on the floor. And they took a particularly stern measurements to hurt the Jews, who of course had very little or nothing to do with that assassination in Paris. The Germans, for example, on that night, told the firemen not to extinguish the fire in the synagogues. The only reason they were there to protect the houses of the Christian population so they wouldn't burn. It was a terrible night. And in addition to all the physical damage, they arrested 30,000 Jews. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Among them, my father. My biological father was arrested that night, and I never saw him again. He was put in a concentration camp of Buchenwald, of which there was only one way out, and that way was from Buchenwald on the ship to get wherever the ship was going, just to get out of Germany. He could not come home, he could not see me, he couldn't do it. As sick as he was from his stay in a concentration camp, he had to get out. And I want to jump ahead now. When I was finally liberated and looking forward to meet up with him, he died. He died while I was on a ship to meet him, but that's in the future. So now we had a terror which was even worse than we had before. From now on, the Nazis clamped down on everything. Some of the laws they were stupid. I want to give you one which I find so utterly idiotic. Let me imagine with me that this is a street, and here's a building, and here's a building, and I'm going here. I want to go over there. They would not let me walk along. I had to go around because no Jew was allowed to walk by a government building. I mean, this is hair-raising the brain. By that time, we had lost everything what was meaningful. No radio, no telephone. We were not allowed to buy newspaper anymore. Let me give you an example how vicious that got. We lived at our address in Berlin for many years. I'm not really quite sure how long, how many years, but I was too young when we moved in, but it was quite a few years. And all of a sudden my mother gets a letter, and I quote you that letter, practically verbatim. And that letter said that the Christian residents of this apartment building no longer wish to live with a Jew under one roof. You are requested within the next 2 weeks, or 4 weeks, to move out wherever you want to go, but you can no longer stay here. We had paid our rent on time, we didn't owe anything, we had taken good care of the property, and yet the Christian renters no longer wish to live. I have the original letter, which is dated November 1938. I have the original. I didn't donate this to the museum. I want to keep this. This is, for me, when I think about Germany, that letter is so typical. And after the war, I investigated that. Who instigated that letter? Well, I found out who instigated this. It was a guy who got killed in the war, but he was the one who got the other renters, the Christian renters, to sign that they wanted to do it. So we had to move. Was it easy to move? The answer was yes and no. The yes part was there facilities, buildings, apartments available? Yes. Were we allowed to move in there? No. Because the Nazis in the meantime had passed another law that any Jewish family kicked out of their present residence can only move in with other Jews. So if you own an apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment, and you have 3 members of your family and one room is empty, then the government say that is the only place you can move to as a Jew because you cannot move into a Christian residence. You know, it's easy for me to say those words. I stand here and I relive this thing. I don't know what your reception is of those things, but if you analyze what it is, if somebody suddenly kicks you out of your home, not because you didn't pay the rent or you did damage something, simply because you happen to belong to a certain religion and we don't want you there. And when you find there is an apartment building next door and you cannot move in there because you happen to be Jewish, then you understand what it meant to be. So, what do you think of my life? What do you think it was to me? Was it worth living? Sure. You still had hope. I had hope. I had hope that someday this mess is going to end. But now, it didn't. So, tell me what happened on the 1st of September 39, excuse me. Ring a bell? How about World War II? World War II started, the Germans moved into Poland, and on the 1st of September, and on the 3rd of September, on the Sunday, the British and the French declared war on Germany because Germany had invaded Poland. Without a declaration of war, they just moved in. And now the British, my parents, ladies and gentlemen, they were jubilant. They think the best thing since green grass that the war has started, and in 6 months, the French and the British will have defeated the Germans, and we will be free. Now, I'm not going to reiterate what happened, but between 1 September or 3 September 1939, when the war was breaking out, the Germans won everything. They were in Paris in June of 1940. They didn't get to Paris in 4 years in World War I. Now they were there in a year. They were in Paris, and up when the swastika was flying from the Eiffel Tower. Here we sat at home bemoaning life. Why isn't there justice in the world? Why couldn't a guy like Hitler and the Nazis lose the war? Well, they did, but it took a while. So, hope was rapidly going out of the window. Hope was diminishing very quickly, because whatever the Germans touched, they seemed to be winning. Nothing we could do about it. And so we thought, it can't get any worse. Well, let me share with you how it got worse. This is a fantastic story, but every word is true. My mother had a friend, a lady friend, about a little older than she was, and that lady came to my mother one day in July of 1942, in the middle of the war, and told my mother and says, Lily, my mother's first name, Lily, I need to get out of Germany. I cannot live here anymore. I don't have family, I don't have relatives, I don't have close friends. I'm all alone. I would like to get out. Emigration under those conditions was punishable by death. And my mother, who wanted to help that woman, happened to know, and I don't know how, happened to know a Catholic priest in the vicinity of Constance. Now, Constance may not mean much to you, but when you look at a map, you will see that Constance is in stone's throw distance to Switzerland. You can practically take a stone and throw it, and it lands in Switzerland. That's how close. Switzerland, of course, was neutral, was friendly, was democratic, and my mother gave that lady the priest's address and said, I cannot help you. You must persuade him yourself. Maybe he'll bring you during the night across the border, and you're free. Well, make a long story short, all this is what happened. The lady went to Constance, met the priest, persuaded him, he brought her across the state, and now the story gets dramatic. So that woman is now in Switzerland, free, independent, and obviously very happy. So she sits down and writes a postcard. That's the first mistake, when you write a postcard in a country that has censorship. But she writes a postcard. She tells my mother where she is, and then she writes a P.S. I wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for your help. Now what does that mean? Any Gestapo officer worth his name who is charged with censorship looks at the sentence, looks at the stamp, which is a Swiss stamp, reads the sentence again, and said, That woman got to Switzerland only with the help of the recipient of that postcard, which is my mother. And so we were arrested in July of 1942. My stepfather, myself, and in fact, it wasn't that easy. My stepfather was arrested, my mother was arrested. They each come in a different prison, one male, one female. And I was told to report the next morning to the police precinct, and then they will tell me what to do with us. Well, that was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon when they were there, and they said the next morning at 9 o'clock. So what did I have? I had the whole night to do something. Well, what do? The war was going on, the Germans were winning, and I had I had the obligation to either go into hiding or report. Well, there was nobody I knew well enough who could take hiding a Jew from the Germans was punishable by death. They didn't fool around, and so I reported, and they bundled us all up, my stepfather, my mother, and myself, and sent it to a concentration camp in Czechoslovakia, which doesn't exist anymore. It's now the Czech Republic. It's a concentration camp which has two names. It has a German name, which is Theresienstadt, and it has a Czech name, which is Terezin, and which is still there, which you can be visiting if you ever go in that direction one of those days. That camp, ladies and gentlemen, killed my determination to stay alive. It was so bad that I can only give you glimpses. First of all, the city under the Czechs had about 4,000 families in there. That was all. The rest of them were all soldiers, and they weren't there anymore. So in that space of 4,000 people, they stuffed 60,000 people. How many of you ever like to be alone sometime? Just an hour, just a day? Raise your hand. I want to see who likes privacy. Thank you. That's what I hope for. In Theresienstadt, with 60,000 people around you, where 4,000 people used to live, there was no privacy. There were always people. And if you think that people who are hungry, dirty, miserable are very pleasant people, let me tell you something. They're not. People got rough, they got mean, they got upset, and it was not something where you enjoy company of other people. So here we lived there. By 1943, the Germans realized that they need to evacuate the camp. They need to, quote, resettle, that's what they call it, the population, because if not, they're going to have diseases and everything going on. And so they began to resettle the population of Theresienstadt. And what the word resettle means, ladies and gentlemen, means death. Resettlement in German language in those days meant you're going to kill them. They shipped them day after day in train loads to Auschwitz and to Birkenau, where they were either tattooed and stayed alive, or they were gassed right under arrival. Go see a movie called Sophie's Choice, and then you will understand where the woman has two babies and the Nazi says, one gets killed, one stays alive, which one do you want to keep? I mean, talk about cruelty. So I was extremely worried that my stepfather and my mother would be, quote unquote, resettled, meaning get killed. Now, let me shift gears for a minute. In the meantime, the war has gone on. We're talking on the American and the British are bombing the hell out of Berlin. Berlin was almost practically destroyed. Why am I telling you this? Because one of the buildings that got destroyed was the headquarters of the SS, was run by a guy of Heinrich Himmler, who was the 4-star general of the SS, and he ran the concentration camp. He also had an army, and his headquarters was completely destroyed, wiped out. And so he wanted a new headquarters. And he went to the German authorities and said, you guys give me a new headquarters, and here's what I want. It will be a barrack-type headquarters, and we're going to build this thing. And then they came to Theresienstadt, the Germans, and they said, we need 250 people, volunteers, to go there and build the guided headquarters. And then they added a sentence which is crucial to my life. The sentence said that if you volunteer, we will not resettle, quote unquote, your folks who are here in the camp in Theresienstadt. And I volunteered. I volunteered simply because I think I owe that to my parents. If I can keep them alive by my volunteering to go and build their headquarters, I volunteered. And I volunteered, and that, ladies and gentlemen, towards the end of my story, was the cruelest thing I had experienced in all these years. It was the first time when I decided that I want to die. I had all these 12 years never had an idea that I wanted to die. I always thought I will live to tell the world what these bastards are doing to the Jewish people. But now I gave up. Life was so cruel, the work was so bad, that I really lost the will to live. In addition to hard labor, hungry, cold, miserable, I also got sick. I had something which they call impetigo, which is a vitamin deficiency thing, which is very ugly. You get big blotches all over your body, and your clothing sticks on you. You get a high temperature. I've had it. I had enough in saying, if fate wants me to die, now would be a good time to do it, because I don't want to live anymore. You got to remember that the Germans had won the war all the way into the Soviet Union until the Battle of Stalingrad in 1943, when the first time the war turned around and the Russians began to lose. But until then, everything was in favor of the Germans. So I lost the courage, I lost the mood. But fate didn't want me to die. Bear with me another 5 minutes and I'll tell you. I was standing, it is now either, and I don't remember, it is either December 1944 or January 1945. I do not remember. But I was standing at the barbed wire, looking out of the camp. The barbed wire, we were inside, and another prisoner and I, we were both standing there. And what we saw was a most amazing view which I could have imagined. We saw a track of German refugees, poor, miserable, hungry, dirty, walking by the camp on the outside. They were free, of course, but the direction of it was they're going from east to west. All these years, from 41 to 45, the Germans went from from west to east, conquering all the land of the Soviet Union until they were just shortly before Moscow. And now suddenly we saw the Germans going west from the east. And I asked the guy next to me and said, do you see this? He said, of course I see it. What do you mean? And I said, well, I don't understand. Who are these guys? And he explained to me that these were German refugees who were fleeing from the Red Army. The Red Army was coming back to win the war. And these Germans were fleeing, trying to reach the American zone of Germany, where they would be treated better than by the Russians. And so I thought by myself, well, if the war is that close, that the Germans are already fleeing, that the Russians are coming so quickly, maybe I shouldn't die. maybe I should make an effort to survive. And that's what I did. I pulled myself together. I was fortunate. In February of 1945, the camp was, Theresienstadt was evacuated, returned back to the camp, to the main camp, and we were there in February of 1945, and on the 5th of May, the Soviet army liberated the camp, and I was free. Thank you. My parents survived, but were so exhausted that they died shortly thereafter. They died in 1946, both of them, simply from exhaustion, but they died at home. With their journey, first of all, you had to get permission to come to the United States, right? So, President Truman, remember when I told you that the immigration system is based on a quota system, okay? Well, Truman went to Congress and said, I want 50,000 people, permission for 50,000 people to go to America outside the quota. And the Congress approved it. And then they published in the papers in Germany that there is a quota for 50,000 people who may apply to come to America. I was one of them. And it was approved, and here I am. Well, I have to go back a little bit. In January of 1942, the Nazis held a big conference. And the conference is very important because it was that conference which was decided on what the Nazis called the final solution. The final solution in great detail. The minutes of that meeting exist. The final solution meant killing all the Jews under their command. They never use the word killing. They just say eliminating, eradicating all the Jews under the German command would be killed. That was the final solution.
But for officers from the, or from veterans from World War I?
In that conference in July, they did three things. They decided the final solution. They also decided who's a Jew. And if you think that's easy, it's not. Because if you're a Christian, your father is Christian, your mother is Christian, your grandfather is Christian, your grandmother, however, is Jewish. Now what are you? So they categorize this, who they're going to kill and who they're not going to kill. And the third element, they decided that Germans who were veterans of World War I would not be killed. They would be confined in ghettos or concentration camp and die there, but they would not send them to gas chambers and kill them. So that was the third. Thank you for reminding me.
I think that's all the time we have. Judy has something that we do.
We have a little gift. It has a CSM insignia on it. You don't have to open it now, but we wanted to be sure you don't forget us, because we surely will not forget you.
Thank you very much.